Good day. So today I'm gonna report the second part of my topic, which is all about evaluating eyewitness testimonies. First is for adults, and then second is children. So as you can see in my slide, this is the picture of our reference book, the Handbook of Forensic Psychology. Okay, for our major topics for adults, first, we will discuss about the case of Northrop and Davis. Second, what is informational considerations in memory? And then, what is decisional considerations in memory? Third, attributes of the eyewitness prior to the criminal event. Fourth, the attributes of the eyewitness during the criminal event. And 5, the post-event factors, meaning after the criminal event. And 6, lastly, the practical considerations. Okay, first, we have here the case of Northrop and Davis. So a little bit of background. Way back January 11, 1993, a housekeeper, female, 36 years old, reported about alleged sexual assault coming from two white men. One is with dark hair and the other one is blonde. And then, after a series of legal proceedings, including this composite sketch, I hope you can see, but I think my camera is blocking it anyway. It is in our handbook. This sketch, the upper part, is the sketch of Northrop, which is identified on the right side as the portrait number 3, and on the bottom picture, which is the other one, the blonde guy, Larry Davis, which is also in picture number 3. Now, these two were sentenced to 20.5 years imprisonment. Now, way back July 2010, it was found that the DNA in the victim as evidence doesn't match the DNA of Northrop and Davis. And so, this is a common classic example of errors in eyewitness reports. So, in the head of the witness, there are many relevant information that is going on. And then, to identify the ground truth of the event, as well as producing an accurate testimony, it can be a very difficult task to do. Now, in line with getting a more accurate eyewitness testimony, there are two things to consider. First is informational considerations, which are those that influence the form and strength of the memory. So it means it influences the quality of the information that is being retrieved through your memory recall. So this includes number 1, faces for identification, the face of the perpetrator and all other accomplices to the crime, as well as um, the lighting of the area, the distance of the victim, you as the eyewitness, to the perpetrator, as well as if you are familiar with the face of the perpetrator. Also, the time of the criminal event to the court proceeding, so the duration of the actual crime to the first interviews coming from the experts. Also, during the interviews, the biases, the line of questioning, the manner of questioning coming from the law enforcer and other experts also influences the quality of memory that being recalled. And also, your exposure to the press, to the social media, to the news channel, to the radio broadcaster, and all other interviews outside the legal proceeding, outside the court, can also have influence on the quality of the information being recalled. Okay, so the second factor that affects the accuracy of the eyewitness testimony is the decisional considerations. So this includes the willingness, the confidence in the details of your information from memory, also included the fear of revenge or retaliation from the perpetrator or the suspect. So basically, it is about your willingness to stand trial, and of course, the jury and the experts will also ask about the competence of your testimony to stand trial. Okay, so in this slide, we can see a table, a quadrant of identifying the suspect as the perpetrator and the decision of the witness. So what is the difference between suspect and perpetrator? The suspect is not yet confirmed that he or she did the crime. The perpetrator is the one um, that is proven to commit the crime. So here, as you can see, um, in this quadrant, the two green squares, are your correct answers, meaning you correctly identify the suspect as the perpetrator, and the second correct answer is you correctly reject the innocent one as the perpetrator. Now, looking at this slide, there are two red squares or red box. No, that is the two errors that you can commit. First is you identify incorrectly someone as the perpetrator. So that means that that person is innocent and his freedom is at stake. The second error is you misclassify and you did not identify the true perpetrator um, in the lineup of suspects. So it means that that perpetrator um, can still commit more crimes. So this is the basic um, dynamics of you being as an eyewitness. Okay, so attributes of the eyewitness prior to the criminal event. So imagine yourself as the eyewitness. One of the factors that affects your memory recall is number one, experience and familiarity with faces. So as I have discussed in our first topic is malingering and deception detection. And based on studies, we are not equipped to detect deception as well as facial recognition. So logically, the more familiar you are with the person's face, then the better the recall compared to stranger or faces of people that you do not know. However, high degree of familiarity does not guarantee correct identification of the face because as I have shared earlier about the case of Northrop and Davis, it was found out that um, recognition doesn't really, it's not a standalone tool to say who is the perpetrator and who is not. Also, it was introduced in the book about unconscious transference, meaning your exposure to certain kinds of faces might have an influence in your facial recognition in the court setup or in the context of the legal proceedings. For example, let's say you are a bartender and then every day you have customers now, so it might influence your facial recognition as it will confuse the sources of your memory recall. Also, we have this own group bias, which explains about the members of one group or ethnic group or race have greater difficulty in recognizing members from the outside of their ethnic group. So in the context here in the Philippines, we call this ibang tao at hindi ibang tao. Okay, another is gender. So according to studies, women are better in recognizing faces, recalling memory, and other object recognition. And the setting here is in the laboratory style of facial recognition. And so, it is supported that in other studies also, women are more likely to develop high levels of anxiety if they are exposed to, let's say, in extreme rides. So that is about the attributes regarding gender. For age, younger children, 10 years old and below, and elder adults are disposed to make false alarms during identification. So the book did not have explanation on this, but um, it only speculates on, for example, for children, they might perceive the interrogation phase or the identification phase of eyewitness testimony as something that is adult controlled in nature, or simply they are just complying. Now, what are the attributes of the eyewitness during the criminal event? So here we will discuss about the dynamics of the victim and the perpetrator. So on the side of the perpetrator, um, does he have disguises? Does he have mask? Does he have mustache or facial hairs? And then also the environment. Is the environment has enough lighting, or the physical um, environment, is it uh, too close or is it too dark? And then also the victim, is he participating in the actual crime of event, or is he just a bystander eyewitness? So here the first thing is distance. So as the distance between the victim and the perpetrator increases, the identification of the guilty perpetrator also decreases. So there is an inverse relationship. Also, the lighting, it is common analogy that the greater the levels of illumination, it will lead to higher rates of identification. Third is the duration of exposure. So the longer the exposure to the target face, it is associated with improved accuracy in recognition. However, the authors reminded that the nature of these dynamics is just probabilistic, because there are many cases that, for example, the one that I just shared and the one that we learned from the introduction to forensic psychology videos, that Ronald Cotton, who was mistakenly imprisoned for 17 years. And then the good thing is, he and the victim became friends and traveling the world informing about eyewitness errors. So again, the duration of exposure is just probabilistic, and it doesn't guarantee accurate recognition. Fourth is disguise. So the common activity of the perpetrator is to change or disguise before and after the commission of the crime. So as experts, you should know that this is the common time element when it comes to disguise. And also the common features that are being disguised are eyes, mouth, and your hair.